Welcome to this video in which I will be breaking down this real motion graphics in DaVinci Resolve. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a new timeline. You can just hit create new timeline, unselect use project settings, go over to format and use vertical resolution and hit create. Now I've already done this, so that's why I'm going to use this timeline over here. The next thing you need to do is drag in a fusion composition, and for this one you need to change the duration to 7, so 7 seconds. So right click, go over to change clip duration and change this from 5 to 7. All right, so let's go ahead, right click, open in Fusion page, and you need to download the assets that I have. You can do that by going over to the link in the description and you can just download them. So the first thing you need to do is add in a background and also a white texture. Now connect this white texture to the background and you will get this merge one, and then connect this with the media out. Now go over to the merge one, and from here, let's first of all change the angle to 90 and let's change the size to 1.2 so that this covers the whole screen. And let's also change the apply mode to overlay. Now you need to go over to the background and click on this color and then change this color code to this one right here. So you can use this color code, or you can just go over with something white and gray, maybe more towards the white. Don't go too much gray. And it would be better if you can just copy this color code. So this will help you. And if you will zoom in, you will see the texture. And even if we undo this, you will notice the difference that the texture is actually making some sort of a change. So once we have that, the next thing we need to do is add in a transform node. So you can just click on transform node, make sure that this media in was selected. Now we were going to use this in order to make some animation to this texture. So while you have the transform selected, go over to this edges and change this to wrap. Now go over here to this center and right click, then you will see the option modify with and then select shape. Now do the same thing with this angle, right click over here, go over to modify with and then select shape. Now you can go over to the modifiers tab, and from here let's go over to the center first, change the smoothness to 4 and the maximum to 360. Now double click on this angle and do the same thing, change the smoothness to 4 and then this to 360. So if you play this, you will see that we get this moving, but we don't need this. What we need to do is add in a stop motion as well. So while you have this transform selected, press Control space and search for stop motion. Now from here, you can just change this to 10. And if you play this, you will see this stop motion now. So now that we have this background done, we can go back to the main timeline and start doing the animations. All right, so now let's go ahead and add in another fusion composition and make sure to extend it so it covers the background that we have right here. Now let's right click, open in Fusion page, and from here, let's drag in a background, connect this to the media out. Now over here, I'm going to change the color code to this one. You can go ahead and copy this. Now let's go ahead and add in this rectangle, connect it with the background. And now we need to just set some settings over here with the width. So let's go ahead and change this to 0.4 and the height, let's change this to 0.3. Move this somewhere around here. All right, so let's change the width to 0.6 and the height to 0.4. So something like this. And now we're also going to drag in this eyeball and connect this with the background. And in the merge, let's go ahead and change the size to 0.6 and move this right here. So make sure this is somewhere around here, not too outside this rectangle in the background or not too much into it, but something like this. Now, while you have this media in selected, which is the eyeball over here, press Control space and search for vignette. Now let's select the vignette node and go over to this operating mode and change this to advanced. Now keep this at oval, but let's change the size to 0.8 and this to 0.9. Now let's change the center to 0.3. So make sure that this area is more visible and then everything else is more, you can say, dark. So that's something that we're going with. You can also change the Y. Just make sure that this area is visible and the rest of this is hidden or it's dark. Okay, so I'm going to just hide this merge for now and go over to the rectangle. Let's go over at 20 frames and create keyframes at width, height, and also at center. Now let's go over to 10 frames and from here let's change the width to 0.4, the height to 0.3. Let's go over at 5 frames and let's further decrease this. So let's go ahead and change the width to maybe 0.3 and the height as well to let's say 0.2. And then finally at 0, let's change the height to 0. So if you play this, this is how it will look. Now let's also do one more thing, which is the center that we had. We had a keyframe over here. So let's go over to 0 and then just use the X to move this. So something like this. So don't overdo it, just do it a little bit. So maybe something like this. All right, so now let's bring this in. Let's make this visible once again. And now we're also going to make some changes according to the rectangle that we have in the background. But before we do that, let's also add in a transform node underneath the vignette. Let's also add in another rectangle, which is the mask. And this will be added, or you can say connected with the merge one. So this will hide the eyeball that you can see right here, but we're just going to copy the settings from rectangle one and then paste them right here. And you can just make sure to click on this node, press Ctrl C, and then go right here and then right click and then click on paste settings. So you will see this is how it looks. But this time we're also going to change the soft edge just a little bit. So this is how it will look. Now let's go over to the transform. And from here, let's go over at 20. And actually one more thing we need to do right here at 20, we need to increase the width so that this is visible. So if we see this now, this is how it looks. So right here at 20 frames, go over to transform and create a keyframe at size, center, and let's also do it with angle. Now let's go right here at 0, change this to maybe 0.5, something like this. And let's also go ahead and change the angle. So let's go with 60. And finally, one more thing, which is the center. So let's change the X a little bit. Actually, let's go with 0.6. And actually, let me just go even further. Let's go at 0.7 actually. Yeah. Okay, so we just need to make some slight adjustment as you can see right here. This doesn't look very nice. So you can go over to the rectangle 2 and from here you can go over at 15 frames and then, well actually let's go over at 10 and then decrease this width a little bit. Do the same thing at 5. So make sure that this is within the boundary that we have of this background right here. So right here at 15, let's do the same thing. All right, perfect. But let's go over to transform once again, and then right here at 10, let's decrease the size even further. And so we just need to make sure that this is within the line or within the rectangle in the background. That's all that I'm trying to do here. But of course, this is a manual adjustment. You need to do it the way you see fit. So right now, I'm just going to decrease this even further. Move this right here. Actually, no, let me just undo this. Let me just increase this a little bit. Move this right here. Then right here at 10, let me decrease this a little bit. Move this right here. So at 0.6, keep the size over there. And then at center 0.7. Then right here at 15, let's decrease this. Keep this inside. Okay, so the way I did it is we had to make sure that the background right here, this background node that we had right here, we need to keep this eyeball within that. So as we are, you can say, revealing this background right here, you were noticing that the eyeball was revealing before this background was being revealed. So this is why I had to make this manual adjustment so that we can keep this eyeball within that reveal part that's going on in the background. And this is looking much more, you can say, better than before, because before this it was just looking very messy. So now it looks much more cleaner. So this is the reason why we had to do that. All right, so once we have that done, let's go over to spline and make sure to select our rectangles, the masking, and click over here, zoom to fit, select all of these and hit S on the keyboard. So let's play this. Perfect. And now you can just unselect this because we won't be needing them. And this is the first part of the animation for this eyeball, which is looking much more interesting. Now let's also go over to the transform and do one more thing, which is the movement within the eyeball by using the angle. So right here at 20, we have this set at 0, but now let's go all the way to the end and then just move this up, maybe minus 20. So if we play this, this is how it looks. All right, so now let's add in our text. And for this, make sure you have the merge one selected and click on this multi-merge. Now we're going to be using this for our text. So let's drag in our text and let's type in the way, or you can type in anything. And the font that I'm using is this, Bibas Noe. I don't know how to pronounce this, to be honest.
Neue, neue, meaning new.
But anyways, whatever the font name is, just use this one and then change this to maybe regular and then connect this with the multi-merge. Now go over here at 20 and let's position this somewhere around here. And also let's increase the size a little bit. So maybe something like this. Let's go ahead, drag in another background. Let's go ahead, copy the settings, paste them right here, connect them, and let's move this right here. Let's just type in people, go with bold, increase the size a little bit. Actually, let's reduce this a little bit. And finally, one more time, let's add in another text and type this in and then use the font called Palace Script MT. Connect this with the multi-merge and there you go. And by the way, the font is up to you. You can, of course, use any font that you want, but this is the one that I'm going with. Now, one more thing we need to do before we do the animation is to change the colors. Or you can change the color after this. So yeah, let's just do that. Okay, so right here from 10 to 20, we're going to reveal this first text. So let's go over to shading, create a keyframe at opacity, 20, go over at 10, and let's go back to the text. And right here, create a keyframe at right on, and then at 20, do the same thing. And then the one at 10, let's just change this to 0. Perfect. And one more thing it would be good to do is go over to layout, create a keyframe at center, go over at 10 frames, and then just slightly move X. So this is how it will look. And then right here at maybe 15, let's start the animation for this one, this text. Let's go over at right on. Actually, let's go over at 20 and then right here at 15. Let's add this in. Then maybe at 25, let's go right here at shading, create a keyframe at opacity, and then right here at 15, let's change this to 0. And then also do some animation for this. So create a keyframe at center at 25 frames, and then right here at 15, let's move the Y a little bit down. So this is how it will look. And finally for this one, let's go over at maybe 20 and reveal this in from 15 maybe. Okay, looks good enough for me. And then at 25, let's create a keyframe at opacity. And then at 15, maybe change this to 0. And also some animation would look good. So let's go over at layout, create a keyframe at center. And then right here at 15, let's move the X a little bit. Perfect. Now, one more thing we need to do before we leave the text is we need to change the color, because right now, if you go back to the timeline, you will see that this is how it looks. So we need to go back, and you can just go over to the text in go over to this section of the text and just drag this dropper and just copy the color from here. Do the same thing for this one and same thing for this one. Now you can go back to the main timeline and see how this looks. Perfect. All right, so we have this basic thing done, but we need some more motion to this. We need some more, you can say, movement to this. So let's go ahead and add some more things to it. Let's go back to the fusion composition. And right here where we have this multi-merge, you can make sure to select that and click on this blur. So we will have this blur node. And right here at 20, let's create a keyframe, add blur size and change this to 0. Now let's go over to 0 frames and change the blur size to 10. And right here at 25, let's change the blur size to 15. So now you will notice some blur right here. And the reason why I added a blur right here is because we're going to make some movement. We're going to move this down and we're going to bring some new text or animations in. So for this, make sure you have this blur selected and click on transform. Now, while you have this transform node selected, go over to the 20th frame and create a keyframe at center. Now go over to the 40th frame and just move the Y down all the way to maybe minus 0.5 so that this is completely outside the screen. Now go over to spline and make sure to select this, unselect the text from here, all the text ones, all the blur ones, everything else, make sure that it's unselected and only select this transform tool. Now click on the zoom to fit, select all your keyframes and hit S on the keyboard. Now we're going to just move them in like this from both sides. And if you play this now, and let me just close the spline and play this now. Here you can see, now this blur makes sense. So now let's go ahead and add in this multi-merge. Make sure you select the transform tool and then click on this multi-merge so that this is connected. And we're going to use this for the text, or you can say the second part of the animation. And by the way, you can go ahead and press Control Space and search for underlay. So you can add this underlay to differentiate between your scenes. So like this, you can just rename this to scene one maybe. But this is a good way to separate your nodes. This helps in when you're editing. So the second scene starts from here. This is why I have separated the two. And for this one, let's start with some text. So go ahead, drag in the text, connect this with the multi-merge tool, and then let's just type in more than just. By the way, you can type in anything that you want, but the font, I'm going to be using the same font, and this will be at regular. So let's move this up a little bit, and let's also increase the size for this, maybe at 0.1, and then drag in another text, copy the settings from here, paste them right here, and connect this with merge tool, move this down, and then this time I'm just going to change this to says, change the font to bold, and then increase the size until it covers the text that we have right here on top of it. So this looks okay. And of course, we do need to change the color, but before we do that, let's just keep this at white for now and then do all the animation. And then right at the end, we're going to change the colors. There's also one other text that we need to add. Let's go ahead and do that. And let's type in attention, maybe move this right here. And this is the font that I'm using, Edwardian script. And let's increase the size, move this right here. And let's go ahead and drag in this magnifying glass. Connect this with the merge tool. And then you can go over to the multi-merge tool and then from here just select this and move this right here. And of course, you can change the size so that this fits in our text. And then you can change the angle as well. So maybe somewhere around here, these are the settings that you can copy. Now we need to do the animation for this. So first, let's go over to text 4. That is this one right here. And let's go over at 30, create a keyframe right here. And then let's go over at 35. And actually, let's go over at 40 and create a keyframe. Then at 38, let's just change this, or you can say remove this just, and then add some backspaces so that this matches in where it left off. And then right here at 35, let's remove this then as well and add in spaces. So let's play this. And then right here at 30, let's just remove everything. So this is how it will look. Okay, so the one right here at 35, let's add in another space. Actually, no, let's remove a space, two backspaces. Okay, this looks okay. And then for this text 5, let's go over at 40. In the shading, let's create a keyframe at opacity, and then at 30, let's change this to 0. So this is how it will look. All right, so now that we have this done, we just need to do one more thing, which is just like we did before, we added a blur and a transform. We're going to do the same thing right here. So make sure you have your multi-merge 2 selected and add this blur 2 and then this transform. Now, using the blur 2, the blur node that we have right here, let's go over at 40 frames and then change the blur size to 0 and create a keyframe. Then go over at 50, create another keyframe and make sure this is at 0 as well. But then go over here at 45 and then change the blur size to 10. So this is how it will look. Now let's go over at transform and create a keyframe at size and then right here at 40, let's change the size to 1.2. So this is how it will look. And now let's go over to spline and make sure everything else is unselected except for the transform 3. So make sure select this, all the keyframes, hit S on the keyboard, and then of course you can make some changes like this. Perfect. So now we need to also add in this part right here that says attention, and we're going to do that right here at 55. Let's go over at text 6, and then right here at shading, I'm going to add this opacity. Then right here at 45, I'm going to change this to 0. And also, let's go over at layout and then create a keyframe at 50 in the center, and then let's go over at 40 and let's move this outside the screen using both the X and the Y. So this is how it look. And let's also do the same thing for this magnifying glass that we have right here. So let's go over at 60, create a keyframe at center, then go over at maybe 50 and let's move this outside the screen. So something like this. And now you can simply just go back to the background and copy the color from here, the color code that we have, and go over to the text and just go ahead and add in this text, add in this color code. So we're going to do the same thing for this one as well. And this one as well. So now we can go back to the main timeline and see how this whole thing looks up till this point. Perfect. All right, so one more thing we need to do is go back to the timeline and from here, go ahead and add in this. Make sure to select your transform 3 or whatever the end node is, and then just drag in this merge 2 or just click on merge and you will get this merge node. And now you need to drag in this dot texture, connect this with the merge tool. Now from here, make sure to change the angle to 90 and the size to maybe 1.7. Now, right here in the apply mode, let's change this to screen and change the operator to in, and let's change the blend to 0.2. So now you will get this texture on the whole animation. All right, so we have you can say, half part of the animation done. Now we need to add in another animation. But before we do that, one more thing left to do is go over to Transform 3, and from 70, make sure you're at 70 and create a keyframe at center. Then let's go over to 90 and you can just move everything else outside the screen. So you just move up the Y at 1.5 maybe. So this is how it look. And then let's go over to spline once again and make sure everything else is unselected. Only the transform 3 is selected. Then select the keyframes right here, hit S on the keyboard, and let's zoom in a little bit and just drag these in. So this is how it look. Now let's go over to the blur node, and from here, let's go over at 70, create a keyframe, add blur size. Then at 80, let's change this to 15. So now let's go back to the main timeline and see how this looks. Perfect. Okay, so right here where we're ending this, or you can say moving this outside the screen, we're going to be adding in another fusion composition, which will be the next part of the animation, the whole animation. So let's go ahead and change this to maybe 4. Yes, let's go ahead, change this to 4. Let me just hide this for now. So the way that I'm going to be doing this one is right where we have this moving outside the screen, right where we have this moving outside the screen, we're going to be moving the next part of the animation in. So I think this is a good position to start. Yeah, so I think this is a good position to start. So let's enable this, right click, open in Fusion page, add in a background node, connect this with the media out, change the alpha to 0, and right here at 25, we were moving in. So I'm just going to add in this transform node and let's create a keyframe at center so that we know when the animation should come in. Once we have this done at 25, let's go over at 10. Yeah, let's go over at 10 and create another keyframe. So this is where we're going to start and this is where we're going to end. But we're going to make the changes later on. Let's go ahead and start adding things to it. So for this, let's go ahead and add in a multi-merge. Let's add in a text and let me just type in looks and change the font to something. Again, the font that I'm using is the same one that we did before. So this is the one. All right, so now let's go ahead and add in these eyeballs once again. And this time we're going to add them in reduce the size. Make sure this is selected, this media is selected. Reduce the size. You can change the angle, move this down maybe. Let's add this in again. And once again, we're going to make some adjustments. So let's move this right here. Actually, let's increase the size for this one. Flip this a little bit. Add this once again. Select this, and this time we're going to just flip this and change the angle and the size, and we're going to move this right here. So maybe something like this. And just so that we can fill in the whole scene, let's go over to this, the first one, and increase the size for this. So maybe something like this. And for this one. Let's just move this out a little bit. Okay, this looks good. And now in the text, you can just increase the size. So maybe something like this. And now we can use the transform to reveal this or move this in. So right here at 25, everything is good. But now let's go over to 10 and move this down outside the screen. And this is how this will come in. Now let's go over to spline, select the keyframes, hit S on the keyboard, and then let's move them in like this. So let's go back and see how this is coming in. Perfect. And one more thing we need to do is again, let's add in a blur node. And from here, let's go over at 20, create a keyframe at blur size, change this to 0. And then right here at 0, let's change this to 10. Okay, so one problem we have right here is this. So in order to correct this, in order to make sure that this is applying on the whole thing, you can just go over to the blur node and from here just change the clipping mode to none. And this will be applied to the whole thing. Okay, one more thing is that right here at 10, or maybe at 25, let's just create a keyframe at blur. So we're just basically moving this ahead so that the blur is actually visible. And then right here at 10, let's change this to 0 and then remove the blur that we had at 25. Maybe let's go over at 15 where this is actually visible. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove this blur size from 0 and then at 10, let's change this to 10. Actually, it's not making much of a difference, so you can just increase the blur size. So maybe let's say at 15. Yeah, so at 15, it looks good. Or we can even go further. Let's go over at 20. See how this looks. Yeah, so 20 looks good for me. Again, this is experimental. You can see it looks good now. Now let's go over to the text and then right here at 20. Actually, let's go over at 30. Create a keyframe right here. Then at 25, let me just change this. Change the text to something else. Then maybe at 35, let's type in something else. And then at 40, let's type in something else. So you get the idea. This is how it will look now. And again, I'm going to just change the color to the same color that we've been using for the background, the same color we've been using for all the text that we had. So you can just change it to that. And by the way, right here, let's go ahead and do some changes. So maybe at 40, create a keyframe at size, and at 45, let's change this to 1.1. And let's go over at blur, create a keyframe right here, and right here at 45, and then the one at 43, maybe let's change this to 5 or 10. All right, so now let's go back to the main timeline and see the whole thing. Perfect. Okay, so I just forgot one more thing, which is that let's go back to this composition right here. And over here, if you go over to the multi-merge where we had these eyeballs, what we can do is we can add some rotation to them. So let's go over at maybe 10. Then for all of them, you need to create a keyframe at angle. So right here, you can just use this layers in the multi-merge and then create keyframes at angle for all of them at 10, then go all the way to the end. Then let's start some animation for this angle right here, and this, sorry, I meant to say eyeball. So you can just do that, and this will make it much more interesting. This will add that dynamic to it, a lot more dynamic to it. So here you can see this adds more dynamic look to it. So this was it for this video. I hope you found this video useful, and I will see you in the next one.